Welcome back everyone, Mariah Monetize here, and in today's video, I am going over the subject of moving to Puerto Rico. I've lived in Puerto Rico for 6.5 years, so I have a lot to say when it comes to making the transition. I personally made the transition from California, Central Valley, so like small town living, to San Juan, Puerto Rico in April of 2018. In today's video, we're going over an article titled from Business Insider, "I moved my family to Puerto Rico for a job. They were miserable, and we returned to Pennsylvania just after 1 year." So I have not read a Business Insider article in what feels like years. I feel like I would read at least 5 per day, but I'm beginning to realize why I don't read Business Insider articles. And it's because, like, what is this? Like, I felt like this was quite a pathetic article. A little bit pathetic from the perspective of the family who was miserable and the reasons why they were miserable, to Business Insider writing an article that lacked so much substance. Like, could you give us just a little bit more? It felt like just borderline pathetic. So I'm going to be getting into it today. I come from the perspective of someone who moved by themselves at the age of 25 with 3 suitcases, no children, no family, no significant other. I eventually moved my vehicle, but I didn't move my personal belongings other than the 3 suitcases that I arrived with. When I went to Puerto Rico, which is funny to kind of reflect back on, I actually had a little bit of like not the best attitude about it. I visited Puerto Rico 3 weeks before moving. I was there for 2.5, 3 weeks. I really didn't even enjoy my first 3 weeks in Puerto Rico. I think I was burned out from travel in general, but I forced myself to make the move, whether I liked it or not. I told myself it's only going to be 3 years, but after 6.5 years, I'm obsessed with Puerto Rico. I can't imagine myself leaving anytime soon. I am just so deeply happy with my life there that people always ask, when are you going to leave? And I always say, until it's not fun anymore. And it's extremely, extremely fun. I'm someone who's always thought about like, oh, maybe I'll live, for like an extended period of time in Portugal or Mexico. And sometimes I think about going for like 3 to 6 months, but honestly, like I can't be away from my friends in Puerto Rico that long. We just have too much fun, and I love the community that I have there, the people that I have there. And now I have a business there, scooterrentalpr.com. I rent Jeeps and scooters. So that all is important that I also spend more time in Puerto Rico because of that. So today's video, I'm going to be getting into the article and critiquing the shit out of it because it is, in my opinion, a little bit pathetic from both perspectives. Whoever they're writing about, which I don't think there's names in here, and Business Insider. I am someone who believes that in order to move to Puerto Rico and have a positive experience, you need to be someone with an open mind, patient, someone who is resilient, can handle change quite easily. If you're someone that complains a lot, you don't have a lot of patience, you're a little bit entitled, you're very particular and need things a certain way, and you have like incredibly high standards, you're probably just going to come and be disappointed. And Puerto Rico is rough around the edges, but like my good friend Sean King always says, it's all about trade-offs, right? We come to Puerto Rico for 0% capital gains and 4% exporting services outside of Puerto Rico, which all tax incentives, I feel like I'm gonna have to say this disclaimer all the time, all tax incentives are available for locals, not just bona fide residents. The only one that is not is a 0% capital gains. We're talking about tourism, and we're talking about real estate tax incentives, exporting services, the Young Entrepreneurs Act, as well as the physicians tax incentives. Those are all applicable to local Puerto Ricans. And it's amazing how many that I've spoken to over the last year, they just think that us people coming from the States are the only ones capable of taking advantage of the tax incentives. That is not accurate. And so I feel like I have to make it a mission to get the word out that locals are also more than welcome to apply for these tax incentives as well. So, obviously Bitcoin is approaching $100,000 at the time that I'm making this video. It might already surpass it by the time I actually get this thing edited and put up. But people are going to be thinking about moving to Puerto Rico. So this video is for those people who are contemplating the move to Puerto Rico, to give you a little bit more insight on what it's like. It is, it's crazy to me that people like now they want to move to Puerto Rico once Bitcoin is like pumping and reaching all-time highs. The time to move is not now. The time to move was like last year when Bitcoin was down in the dumps, because you still have to pay taxes. Let's say, for example, you're living in California, you bought Bitcoin at 10K. When you move to Puerto Rico, it's 100K. You still got to pay taxes on that $90,000. But if you are considering moving to Puerto Rico in the near future, here's one thing that I could tell you. Let's say the Bitcoin drops to like $80,000, and I would say buy a plane ticket, go to Puerto Rico, and claim that as your move day. So there are some different ways that you can claim your move date, which then basically timestamps the price of Bitcoin and when it comes to the whole tax situation. So let's go ahead and finally get into this article. So the bullet points: I moved my family to Puerto Rico for a job. We were excited about the warm weather and the beaches. Once we moved, we struggled to adjust, and we felt a lot of loneliness being far from family. We went back to Pennsylvania after a year. I wish we'd thought about the move more before doing it. So, I think it's important that you have as much information as you possibly can before making the move to Puerto Rico, and hopefully this video will give you some insight. So this is back in 2015. This is pre-Hurricane Maria. 2015, the opportunity to move from Pennsylvania to Puerto Rico presented itself by way of a job offer with a med tech company. So there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies in Puerto Rico. They did have tax incentives. Was it back in the 80s or 90s? They eventually pulled that program, which several pharmaceutical companies left, but there are still many. I believe Puerto Rico actually stands as the most manufacturing for what is that device that they use for people with heart issues? I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on what I'm thinking about. But basically those like devices that they use for people that have heart issues. Pacemaker? I think. Pacemaker, yes. Okay. I've lived there when I was younger. My wife at the time and two younger daughters were excited to move somewhere new. We fell in love with the idea of living on an island, having warm weather year-round, and being close to the beach. So this guy actually had insight on what it was like to live in Puerto Rico. He had lived there when he was younger. We don't know a ton of information, but he had an idea. Great. If you're coming to Puerto Rico and obviously warm weather and beaches sound enticing to you, that's great. Puerto Rico does have that. But like I said, Puerto Rico has its trade-offs. So I took the job and moved the first week of April. In June, my daughters finished their school year and the rest of my family joined me on the island. This is always a huge pain point for families. So if you're someone that's coming to Puerto Rico specifically for the tax incentives, you probably have some sort of amount of money more than the average person. You're probably not middle class. In Puerto Rico, I don't know a ton about this because I don't have children, but from what I've talked to people who do have kids, I don't think there's really any such thing as like a quality public school. So you are going to have to put your children into private schools. It does sound like in Puerto Rico, private schools are a lot cheaper in some cases compared to the States. But I have heard of prices. I think like the two top private schools in Puerto Rico would be like Robinson and is it Baldwin? And I could have swore someone told me recently that Baldwin is like, what was it, $5,000 a month? If you have a second kid, you get 10% off. I don't know if that's accurate, but those are just some numbers that I've heard, and those are for like the top in like the San Juan area. My company hired movers to pack and ship our belongings and my then wife's vehicle. We were put in a hotel since our belongings would take several weeks to arrive. I could feel the tension in the family begin to build up in our new home. Though the hotel was spacious, it was nothing like the home we'd left in Pennsylvania. My then wife's car hadn't arrived yet, and there was nothing within walking distance, so my family stayed in the hotel until I came home from work. So this seems like a really good opportunity to like rent a car. You can, if you know what you're doing, you can find good deals, especially in 2015, on car rentals. So the reason why this article drives me nuts is because it just seems like they sat at home and were just so confused why they didn't like Puerto Rico. We just sat at home all day. We're not really sure why we didn't enjoy Puerto Rico. So it seems like the effort to make it a place that you would want to live is a big thing with most people. Like, it takes effort to move to a new location, not really know anyone, put yourself out there, make friends, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Because for most people, it's not the easiest task ever to make friends and be open. But in this whole article, the common theme is like, we sat home and we didn't leave the house and we're not really sure why we didn't like Puerto Rico. Towards the end of July, our belongings arrived in our rental home in a gated community in Catania, but the car was still on the way. Catania is kind of like an odd place to live for someone. Actually, I love Catania. It's really close to San Juan, but I think you have to have a really good idea of all the neighborhoods. So for example, if you want a location that's more walking distance and that is like a little bit more social, Catania is probably not going to be it. If you're only an English speaker, that's going to be more of like a local experience. And so like Ocean Park, Isla Verde, Condado, obviously those are more expensive areas to live, but it's just going to add to like the enjoyment of your daily life. Until it arrived, we had to share my vehicle. She was used to doing all our errands during the day, and now she had to wait for me to get home. This caused a lot of tension and arguments. So imagine you have all this tension and all these arguments with you and your wife because she doesn't have a car. Rent a car. And like, yes, Puerto Rico, like moving there, it's an expensive place. In 2015, it was probably a little bit less. But if like, you can't be moving somewhere with like not a lot of money and not having a lot of resources and think that it's going to be easy breezy. So like that paragraph alone is just like, man, one thing that drives me nuts is when there are clear solutions to problems and people just, I think they like the arguments is all the only thing I could think of. Then 2 days after we moved into our new house, I turned on the faucet in the kitchen and no water came out. I asked my neighbor whether he knew of any issues. He told me the island was experiencing the worst drought in decades and water was being rationed. So yes, that happens to me not frequently. I don't know. I would say maybe like 5 to 8 days out of the year, my house doesn't have water. But guess what? I have several gallons of water, plenty of water bottles, so that if that happens, I'm good. And if it bothered me that badly, I would get a cistern. So if you're someone that can't handle the electricity being out for 12 hours sometimes, if you're someone that can't handle the water being out for one time it was like 3 days for me, the water was out. That was pretty shitty. Then you need to understand that you need to get a place with a cistern and a generator. Like these are all very simple things. It's all very basic information, but sometimes these things happen in Puerto Rico. We now had to make sure to store enough water each week to cook and bathe once it was turned off. We'd never experienced something like that before and struggled to adjust. Well, that's why camping is always good, when you're a kid, so that you kind of know what it's like to rough it a little bit. The move also put a strain on our social lives and really impacted my youngest daughter. We enrolled my youngest daughter in an online high school program since she didn't speak Spanish, Puerto Rico's primary language. Okay, well, if your child is basically homeschooled, then yes, you're going to have to make a much bigger effort to put them in sports or dance or other extracurricular activities so there are kids with a social life. Like imagine being a kid stuck at home all day because you go to school online and your mom doesn't have a car. And yeah, I would go batshit crazy as well. But it's like, I feel like these people just really set themselves up for failure and just spinning in circles like, I'm not sure why Puerto Rico sucks. But the physical isolation and having to do schoolwork independently affected her grades and social life, driving her to tears on several occasions. She was close to her older sister, but she was flying back to the mainland to start college soon. Never once have we heard like one effort yet into like finding solutions to any of these problems that are presented? Not really. Really, living in Puerto Rico was a lonely experience for all of us. If you move somewhere new, you have to understand that you have to put yourself out there. And I always think of Puerto Rico as a very simple and easy place to make friends. Maybe it's always just been simple and easy for me to make friends in general because like I'm anti-confrontation most of the time. But if you are someone, this is what makes Puerto Rico so easy to make friends. Okay, 2015 is different. The tax incentives just started. There's not a lot of people from the States moving there, okay? Like I can understand that component of the situation. But there is like a WhatsApp chat with like, I don't know, 50 at least a minimum different groups. You can find a running club, a hiking club, a foodie group, beach tennis, volleyball, like every sport you could possibly think of, poker, like Whatever your interests are, there is something there for you. But you have to put in a little bit of an effort. You have to put yourself out there. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You got to make the first move and ask someone if they want to go get a drink, go get a coffee, go get lunch. Like, all of those things are part of moving somewhere new. And if you can't do those things and it sounds absolutely terrifying to you, then don't move anywhere. Just stay where you're at. We used to have family a short drive away, and even some we could visit after a few hours of driving. Now, our nearest family members were at least a 4-hour flight away. So that's the thing, is that like some people can't handle being away from their family. I didn't know if I was going to be able to handle being away from my family. Like, I come from a giant Portuguese family. I have like 100 cousins. And for me, like, I always come back for the holidays and like special occasions, whether that's weddings or like a very important birthday. But for me, like, I can handle being away from my family because I have an established life in Puerto Rico. I truly enjoy my friends who I love so dearly and have ultimately become like family to me. And I think that's what makes Puerto Rico so unique and so special. And I would say it took maybe like 3 years, like the first 2 to 3 years living in Puerto Rico, I would kind of always look forward to like getting back to California and seeing my family and what was familiar and normal. But then once I was in Puerto Rico and I had a home that I really liked, and I had my car there, and I had social activities that I enjoyed doing, and I made many amazing friends that started to feel like family, then Puerto Rico felt like home, and I'm like sad to leave. And I always look forward to come back, but I'm also excited to come see my family. So you just have to like understand yourself and know yourself to see if it's something that's right for you. Though I made connections at work with my colleagues and employees, they didn't extend outside work. All my close friends were back in the US mainland. But then again, I would like to know, like, did you make an effort to like hang out with your colleagues outside of work? We also didn't have much of a social life. During the weekends, I tried to fight off the loneliness and lack of social connection by exploring different parts of the island, but it was short-lived. Once Monday came, I was off to work again. Okay, so they tried to get out a little bit throughout the island, but this is the thing, like, if your family speaks English, you're probably not going to find English speakers if you're going outside of San Juan, okay? San Juan has a lot of English speakers, and so does also the West Coast, like Rincon area. So, you have to be around people that speak English if that's your primary language to make those connections. After about a year of stress and tension, we returned to the States. We lasted in Puerto Rico for about a year until my family and our belongings headed back to Pennsylvania. I stayed on the island by myself for 4 months until I could find a new job. Though we enjoyed our proximity to the beach and mountains and the island's warm weather, I feel as if we didn't think the whole move through. Correct, you definitely didn't think the whole move through. We didn't spend enough time considering the impact that such a significant shift would have on our lives. But you also have to ask yourself, did you make a serious, intentional effort? Did you have the desire to make an intentional, serious effort? We undermined how important community was and how difficult it would be to adapt to a new place, especially one I'm not sure we researched enough. Okay, so at least he's admitting that, hey man, well, we gotta did this to ourselves. If I had to do it all over again, I would weigh the pros and cons of such a move, research current events and our destination, and then make an informed decision rather than an emotional one. Okay, so, I guess I forgot that end of the part of the article where the gentleman does take some responsibility for not really thinking the whole thing through. So hopefully this video gave you some insight if you're considering moving to Puerto Rico, because there's nothing, it's sad to see people move to the island, really not enjoy it and leave. Like, there are some people that come to Puerto Rico, they put in a serious effort, and it's just not for them, okay? I have found the people that typically struggle the most in Puerto Rico are the people that really don't have friends. They're the ones that typically want to leave. But it's also people that don't really make an effort into having friends, or maybe they're just not that enjoyable of a person to be around, So you have to really ask yourself those questions. Is it easy for you to make friends? Are you a social person? If you're more introverted, maybe it's going to be a struggle. So I wanted, like I said, to make this video so that no one's time is wasted, Coming to Puerto Rico is definitely a unique experience. For me, it was an easy transition. People always ask, what was the hardest part about moving to Puerto Rico? And I can't really think of one thing. I still am not fluent in Spanish, and I somehow get away with it. That kind of is oddly worded. But it's more of like, Many people in San Juan speak English. I have employees that speak Spanish. A translator always, kind of gets the job done, and that's that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to know more about Puerto Rico, go ahead and put some topics down below of videos that you would like me to make about moving to Puerto Rico. So that's all that I have for you today. As always, go out there and create a portfolio that you love.